What if the secret to a richer life wasn't earning more but spending smarter? Not as a math problem, but as a set of simple choices that shape how you feel, how you live, and how secure you become. This audiobook compresses the core of the art of spending money into a tactical blueprint: how to align spending with what truly matters, how to avoid the hidden traps of status-driven consumption, and how to design small spending rules that deliver outsized emotional and financial returns. Expect clear, non-judgmental frameworks you can test immediately, not vague platitudes about frugality. Chapter 1. Rethink value. Measuring emotional return, not price. What if the first and most useful question about any purchase were not how much it costs, but how much life it returns? The practical shift at the heart of smarter spending is to treat money as a decision tool that buys emotional and functional returns rather than points on a ledger. Start by defining a single value metric you will use for discretionary purchases. Call it the emotional return score on a 0 to 10 scale. Before you buy, ask yourself 2 quick questions: or what happens to my daily life if I own this? And will that change still feel true in 6 months? If the expected score is low, the purchase is likely status or habit, not value. Turn the evaluation into a ritual. Pause for a deliberate 60 seconds. Imagine using the item or living with the service for a week and assign the score. That ritual alone reduces impulsive upgrades. Practical examples clarify the method. Imagine a new phone that promises novelty and vanity. Its emotional return for many is low because the daily function is near identical to older models. Its status return is the tempting extra. Conversely, intuitive purchases such as a quiet mattress or a simple weekly meal service can have large, persistent returns because they compound into better sleep or time reclaimed. The second move is to run mini experiments. For any category where you suspect misallocation, substitute a 30-day trial of the opposite choice and measure differences. If you habitually chase premium coffee out, try a home method and record your enjoyment and time saved. If the experiment shows no significant loss in emotional return, you've uncovered waste. Third, implement an expense taxonomy that separates utility purchases from identity purchases. Utility purchases solve repeated friction: commuting tools, reliable software, low-latency internet. These typically deserve higher budgets because their marginal returns accumulate daily. Identity purchases signal who you want to be: fashion, cars, status subscriptions, and they should be smaller, intentional experiments because the uplift is often social and transient. Build simple rules, allocate a higher percentage of discretionary budget to utility categories, cap identity spending at a fixed percentage each year, and require a public mini-artifact for identity spend such as a short review or a photo journal that forces you to justify the emotional return. Finally, convert the measurement into a portfolio approach. Treat your spending like an investment portfolio. Allocate small amounts to high emotional return anchors that reliably improve daily life, and allow a modest allocation to experiments that test identity upgrades. Over time, increase the share of anchors that statistically improve your daily baseline while pruning repeat low-score experiments. This chapter is not an argument for austere living. It is about aligning spending with the returns that matter. When your mental economy rewards purchases that increase consistent happiness, convenience, and autonomy, the truly rich outcome, more meaningful time and less noise, begins to appear. Chapter 2. Status and comparison. Escape. The treadmill. Comparison is a stealth tax on happiness. Every new level of spending you adopt quickly becomes the baseline you must defend. The first practical insight is to identify the social forces that nudge your spending upward and to neutralize them systematically. Start by scanning your last 6 months of discretionary payments and labeling each one as private benefit or social signaling. Private benefits are purchases that measurably change your daily function. Social signaling buys you image. For signaling purchases, write down who the buyer is trying to persuade and why. Making that explicit often shows the true beneficiary is social self, not real-life utility. Next, design an anti-treadmill rule. When tempted by a status purchase, require a substitution experiment where you commit to reallocating the same money to a proven emotional return anchor for 90 days. If your daily life improves more from the anchor, the signaling purchase fails the test. Another powerful tool is to create personal norms that decouple identity from category. Rather than aspiring to a label, premium gym member, luxury car owner, set functional standards. I will buy fitness access that guarantees 3 quality workouts per week. I will buy transportation that reduces commute time by X minutes. Those practical criteria prevent social positioning from driving the decision. The timing of spending also matters. People upgrade incrementally to keep up with peers and then rationalize the upgrades as deserved rewards. Implement a slow-pace policy for upgrades. Delay any non-essential upgrade by 60 days, then evaluate whether the desire persists. Many impulses evaporate once the novelty decays. For household and social rituals, develop a transparent spending posture. Communicate to close peers that you prioritize experiences and long-term optionality over frequent, conspicuous upgrades. This sets expectations and reduces social friction when you decline invitations to lavish consumption. Finally, practice scarcity-resistant generosity. When you avoid status traps, you free capital to be generous in meaningful ways. Smaller but frequent gifts, hospitality that builds real relationships, or support for causes aligned with values. Generosity funded by considered spending produces social returns that are durable and not dependent on ever-escalating displays. By breaking comparison into explicit steps, labeling purchases, requiring substitution tests, creating functional standards, imposing delay rules, and practicing strategic generosity, you progressively escape the treadmill and let true value guide where your money goes. Chapter 3. Margin and Optionality. The hidden benefit of not spending. Many of the best spending decisions are actually decisions not to spend. Margin is the deliberate creation of space, financial, temporal, and psychological, that buys optionality and reduces stress. The operational move is to prioritize margin over maximizing short-term lifestyle. Practically, define a margin target as a percentage of income or a fixed cash buffer that you will maintain as a non-negotiable rule. Automate it. Schedule transfers to a margin account the moment income arrives, rather than treating margin as what's left. This simple automation turns margin from an aspiration into a habit. Why does margin matter? Because it lets you say yes to opportunities and no to desperation-driven choices. A small capital buffer allows you to take a 3-month sabbatical to test a new business, whereas living on the financial edge forces you into safe but unfulfilling stability. Time margin is equally important. Spend less on status commitments that monopolize your calendar and more on discretionary time reserves that allow experimentation and rest. The third form is psychological margin. Avoid subscription creep and social obligations that generate low return pressure. Implement a quarterly review where you cancel one recurring cost and one standing social commitment that produces more friction than joy. Preserve a runway of small, meaningful freedoms that act as real options. Next, translate margin into spending decisions with a simple heuristic. For any purchase with significant downside risk, leverage, long contracts, or irreversible commitments require twice the margin buffer and one small pilot test. This rule forces conservative scaling of new expenses and preserves flexibility. Finally, reframe margin as an active investment that returns optionality. Track decisions you could take because margin existed, the small projects you started, the relationships you maintained, the risk you could bear, and see margin as a productive asset rather than idle cash. When you accumulate a habit of buying margin before upgrades, you discover that freedom, more than possessions, delivers the richest return. Chapter 4. The joy of small, repeated delights. Design daily. Wins large. Flashy purchases often promise dramatic happiness, but rarely deliver sustained contentment. The smarter path is to scaffold daily delights, small, repeated expenditures that reliably boost mood and accumulate into a richer life. Start by cataloging low-cost rituals that consistently raise your baseline well-being. A weekly favorite meal, a small monthly local event, a subscription that yields frequent, useful content, or a neighborhood coffee with a friend. Evaluate these rituals using the emotional return score and prioritize them. Next, design redundancy into joy. Pick 3 small delights across different categories: sensory, food, social, friends, and cognitive, books or learning, so shifts in circumstance do not wipe out your happiness engine. Invest in making these rituals frictionless. Prepay for a class, book recurring reservations, or schedule consistent social slots so the happiness does not require decision energy each time. The power of repetition comes from lowering the bar for pleasure. The easier it is to get the small win, the more reliably it occurs. Contrast this with hedonic adaptation from big purchases. Novelty fades quickly and you must escalate to maintain the same thrill. Small rituals also anchor memory and identity. Over time, they form the scaffolding of a life you recognize and enjoy. A practical innovation is the joy escrow. Allocate a modest fixed monthly amount to microjoys and protect it as sacrosanct. During lean months, you consciously preserve this small fund because the daily uplift it buys prevents larger long-term erosion of well-being. Lastly, record qualitative returns. Keep a one-line daily note of a small pleasure you experienced and review it monthly. Patterns will emerge and guide where to reallocate the joy escrow for maximum consistent return. By designing small, repeated delights, you build a life where contentment is habitual rather than intermittent. Chapter 5. Rules for a richer. Spending life. Concrete practices to follow. Practical rules convert good intentions into sustainable behavior. Adopt a short set of non-negotiable spending rules that protect value, margin, and joy. Rule 1. Implement the 48-hour purchase pause for non-essential items. Delay reduces impulse buys and clarifies whether the desire is durable. Rule 2. Use a 4-question checklist for all sizable purchases. What problem does this solve? Who benefits most? Will this change my daily life? And is there a lower-cost alternative that gives most of the value? If one answer is weak, reconsider. Rule 3, automate margin. Schedule transfers to savings, investments, and a small joy fund immediately on payday. Rule 4, adopt a one-page annual spending review. List your top 10 expenditures by emotional return and cut the bottom 2. Rule 5, create a buy time fund. Allocate a modest monthly sum to pay for convenience when reclaiming time yields meaningful returns, such as childcare for focus blocks or a service that allows you to pursue higher value work. Rule 6. Practice public justification for identity purchases. Write a single sentence explaining the purchase and post it privately or share with a trusted friend before buying. Accountability reduces impulse. Rule 7. Schedule periodic consumption audits. Each quarter, cancel one subscription and substitute a higher emotional return ritual. Rule 8. Build generosity into the system. Small, regular giving is a spending pattern that compounds social wealth and reduces the pressure of conspicuous display. Finally, remind yourself that good spending is iterative. Run small experiments, measure emotional returns, and scale what improves daily life. These rules are compact, not prescriptive. They create constraints that preserve the most valuable commodity: freedom to choose tomorrow. Start by picking 2 rules to adopt this month, automate them, and observe how your spending decisions become clearer, calmer, and more aligned with a richer life. Chapter 6. Invest in experiences, not signals. If the aim is a richer life, one of the clearest empirical rules is that carefully chosen experiences usually return more durable satisfaction than status goods. Experiences are social, memory-forming, and identity-shaping. They also adapt less quickly to hedonic treadmill dynamics because their value lives in memory and story rather than in constant external comparison. The practical move is to reframe discretionary spending categories through the lens of experiential value and to design experiments that reveal what kinds of experiences actually increase your daily well-being. Start by splitting discretionary budget into 2 buckets: routine anchors and episodic experiments. Routine anchors are small recurring experiences that reliably move your baseline: regular social dinners with close friends, a monthly museum membership, weekly lessons that stretch you creatively. These anchors should be automated. A standing calendar invite for friend dinners, an auto-renewing membership, or a monthly transfer for lessons. The automation prevents decision friction and ensures the emotional return compounds because repetition deepens relationships and skills. Episodic experiments are one-off or infrequent experiences that test a new dimension: an extended trip to a new culture, a week-long retreat, or a high-intensity course. Treat these episodic spends as mini-research projects with deliberate planning. Predefine the hypothesis: will travel X deepen my sense of perspective? A small budget and measurement criteria such as a one-line, month-later reflection on lasting value. Use a short experiment window and an after-action ritual to capture what the experience actually returned. That ritual might be a 30-minute recorded reflection and a photo journal that links memory to meaning. Avoid experiential inflation. Bigger trips do not always scale returns proportionally. Sometimes a well-executed weekend close to home with the right people produces more long-term joy than an expensive but rushed overseas tour. The second important practice is social alignment. Many experiences deliver value only when shared with people who matter. Prioritize experiences that strengthen key relationships: quarterly mini-retreats with family, a yearly skill-building week with a mentor group, or regular joint volunteering that deepens both connection and purpose. Structuring experiences this way converts spending into durable social capital. Third, limit signaling within experiential choices. For example, choose a modest but meaningful venue for a celebration that prioritizes conversation and memory over visibility. Finally, protect experiential spending with margin. If an impulsive trip would deplete your reserves, plan differently. Build a joy fund that accumulates small monthly amounts to finance experiments without eroding financial optionality. Over time, you will notice a pattern. Well-chosen, repeated experiences raise baseline happiness, create identity continuity, and resist hedonic erosion far better than most goods purchased for status. Chapter 7. Beware and manage lifestyle. Inflation. Lifestyle inflation is stealthy. As income rises, expenses expand in discrete steps that feel justified until the new baseline becomes a prison rather than a platform. The corrective is not to freeze lifestyle forever, but to adopt policies that let you upgrade intentionally and keep freedom intact. The first policy is the deliberate upgrade rule. Before any significant upgrade, home, car, recurring services, apply a three-question test. Does this upgrade measurably reduce a repeated friction in my life? Does it scale happiness for more than 6 months? And does it preserve margin equal to at least 3 months of basic living costs? If you cannot affirm 2 of these, delay and design a smaller experiment. Second, use a % savings anchor. Automate a fixed percentage of incremental income to savings and investments before you decide about upgrades. This creates a default that privileges future options and prevents after-the-fact regret. The third technique is the reverse budget upgrade. When you consider an upgrade, design an offset that preserves net optionality. Sell a redundant asset, cancel a low-return subscription, or take a smaller discretionary vacation that year. That offset forces clarity about trade-offs and avoids silent creep. Fourth, institutionalize temporary upgrades rather than permanent ones. Test living in a nicer neighborhood for 6 months through a short-term lease, rent a premium car for a month instead of buying, or trial a full-service option before committing. These controlled trials provide real experience data, so decisions are evidence-based. Fifth, commit to an annual upgrade audit. On payday week each year, list all new recurring costs added in the past 12 months and evaluate their emotional return with the emotional return score. Cancel the bottom 2. Finally, build identity rules that decouple status categories from self-definition, define functional standards, commute time under X, living space that supports Y activities, not labels, luxury car owner. Planned, reversible upgrades, combined with automatic savings, preserve freedom, let you enjoy rising income, and prevent the slow creep where more income just buys more constraint. Chapter 8. Subscriptions, Tech, and the Hidden Drain. On value, subscription services and convenience technology quietly shift spending from discrete, deliberate purchases to continuous flows that are easy to buy and hard to audit. The smart response is a periodic subscription hygiene protocol and a rule set that keeps technology aligned with purposeful living. First, run a quarterly subscription audit. List every recurring charge, note the monthly cost, and score each on emotional and functional return. Cancel anything scoring below a modest threshold, or consolidate services where possible to capture discounts without paying for overlap. Second, adopt feature-first skepticism before subscribing. use trial periods aggressively, and require a 1-week tangible improvement in your weekly routine before converting trials to paid. Third, set friction-light cancellation rules. Store passwords and cancellation scripts in one place, so ending a low-return subscription requires low effort, not heroic friction. Fourth, design tech windows that protect mental bandwidth, block social feeds during prime focus blocks, schedule email batching windows, and use single-purpose apps that reduce cognitive switching. Fifth, treat convenience purchases as time investments with measurable ROI. Buying ready meals or housekeeping makes sense when reclaimed hours are spent on high-return activities or meaningful experiences, but avoid convenience for its own sake. Test the time-cost equation for a month before permanent adoption. Sixth, manage discovery bias, the pressure to adopt every new service, by limiting monthly trials to a fixed number and applying an evening reflection ritual to decide if the novelty yields sustained benefit. Finally, use aggregated tools to visualize cumulative subscription spend and trend lines. Seeing the annualized number often triggers better decisions than perceived small monthly amounts. A lean, intentional tech ecosystem amplifies freedom. An unfettered subscription stack quietly erodes it. Chapter 9. Teach Value and Habits. Money as a cultural conversation. Spending patterns are cultural. They flow from norms learned early and reinforced by peers and institutions. If your objective is a richer life, part of the work is to socialize better norms, teach children, align with partners, and shape friend circles so shared values support rather than sabotage wise spending. For children, the lesson is simple and experiential. Small, regular allowances tied to 3 buckets: save, spend, and give. Teach delayed gratification, charity, and decision ownership. Use short, discrete experiments, a 1-week challenge to allocate coin choices, or a micro-business that lets a child trade labor for a sales outcome and see profit and loss. For partners, create a transparent spending policy. Shared monthly planning sessions that list upcoming identity purchases, experiment funds, and recurring commitments. Agree in advance on thresholds that require mutual consent and on a simple, one-line justification for identity purchases. For friend groups, model different conversation rituals. Share recent high emotional return choices rather than envy-driven upgrades. Arrange potluck gatherings or low-cost rituals that reinforce connection without status pressure. Social proof matters. Aligning your circle with smaller, richer consuming patterns makes it easier to follow them. Build public rituals of generosity that replace conspicuous consumption signaling. Host a simple annual community event that costs modestly but yields durable social returns. Finally, cultivate a private learning culture. Share one after-action note when a spending experiment succeeds or fails. This transparency creates collective wisdom and reduces repeated mistakes. Money becomes a cultural conversation that supports life-enhancing choices rather than a silent engine of comparison and anxiety. Chapter 10. Safeguards, Philanthropy, and the Quiet. Joy of enough. A truly rich life requires safeguards that preserve freedom and a philosophy for what enough means. Start with structural safeguards, automated margin transfers, a small emergency fund covering 3 to 6 months of expenses, and a clear insurance map, health, liability, and critical replacement policies where exposure is real. Keep estate basics in place, an up-to-date directive and a simple will, so sudden events do not force needless consumption or distress. Next, design giving as part of spending architecture. Regular small-scale giving aligned to values compounds social return and often increases personal satisfaction more than an equivalent self-directed purchase. Make giving automated and intentional. A set percentage of income or a recurring donor-advised plan that channels generosity without decision friction. Finally, define enough concretely. Write a one-page statement describing what freedom means to you. Minutes with family, creative time, or capacity to choose work, and derive an annual passive income target that funds that life. Use that target to guide reinvestment versus consumption trade-offs. Revisit the enough definition yearly. Allow it to evolve, but anchor major choices to that statement so spending supports a purposeful life rather than a reactive one. The combination of safeguards, disciplined giving, and a clear enough definition prevents both reckless depletion and joyless hoarding. It positions money as an instrument to buy agency, relationships, and meaning. Conclusion: a practical 3-step lab to spend better. Starting now, begin with a small lab. 1 week, 3 tools, 1 rule. This week, pick 3 things to track. 1 recurring subscription cost, 1 upcoming discretionary purchase, and 1 small experience you can schedule. Apply the 48-hour pause to the discretionary purchase, run a short trial or mini-experiment for the experience, and perform a quick subscription audit. At the end of the week, write a 1-paragraph reflection. What changed in your attention, joy, and margin? Then institute 2 simple automations, a monthly transfer to a joy fund equal to 2 to 5% of income, and an immediate transfer to a margin buffer. Finally, pick 1 social move. Share your experiment result with a partner or a friend to create accountability. The art of spending money is less about austerity and more about deliberate choice. Measure emotional returns, protect margin, design experiments, and let repetition build a life where money buys what truly matters. Start small, test fast, and let the quiet adjustments compound into a life that feels richer, because it actually is.